All right, at 7:30, I am going to bring us back to public session. So just as a matter of record, I called the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. We immediately went into executive session. Only the executive session business was discussed. So at 7:30 p.m., we are coming back. I'm calling the public session back to order. And if you would all join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there any public comment this evening? Seeing none. Thank you all for coming. I do want to acknowledge Chief McDonald and the School Resource Officer Simmons have joined us for a discussion that is a bit later on our agenda about school safety. I also want to acknowledge Ryan Milkunis? Milchunes. Sorry about that. Who is our new student representative on school committee. Congratulations. Super happy. Thank you very much. I did tell Ryan if he has any questions, just put his hand up. Super easy, but we are thrilled that you are with us.
Thank you.
Do you have any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
So
I just want
go ahead.
to acknowledge Sasha, the therapy dog, as well.
Absolutely. One of the most important members of the audience tonight. No, it's okay. So, under communications, are there any communications that you had?
No.
I have one.
I have, yes.
So, I think it would be remiss for me not to acknowledge a post that was made by the Pembroke Teachers Association on their public Facebook page, which was posting an open letter to the superintendent, making several assertions and accusations. It is quite clear that this is now a public document. My understanding is it has actually been distributed to children and students. I want to be clear about a couple of things, right? We have always enjoyed a very good working relationship with the Pembroke Teachers Association, and this group greatly values our teachers that do incredible work on a day-to-day basis. However, I have been incredibly dismayed over the last several months to see the types of communications that are being distributed and are coming out. There are multiple half-truths, there is multiple amounts of spin, and this open letter is actually addressing something that has not been before this committee previously, that candidly this committee had no right to actually know or understand because it was a personnel matter, and under the law, a personnel matter is handled in the administration. My understanding, however, now that it is a public document, is that there was a level 2 grievance that was heard by the superintendent. And by contract, the superintendent has 10 school days to reply. I've asked the superintendent, and she is prepared to fulfill that obligation and will reply. That reply is not a matter of public record, and if it is leaked, I will comment on that also. This committee is not going to stand for bullying, intimidation, or harassment of the administration or our team. We are going to respond to these things until it stops. I will also say that we are going to continue to work as best we can with the leadership of the Pembroke Teachers Association to make sure that our teachers are treated fairly. And as such, I will acknowledge one thing from that communication, and it's something that candidly we didn't do a good job at. There were accusations that were made by a couple of teachers back in, I believe, the November timeframe. We've taken too long to respond to that. But the facts of the matter are, well, we could have been more communicative and should have been more communicative to teachers. The district did what was fair and appropriate. We actually retained legal counsel to put forward a fair, objective review, investigation, and they actually went through multiple investigatory interviews with multiple staff members. That takes time. We actually, that I know of, don't have that report in their final findings back as of yet. Those are the facts. In pushing and intimidating and harassing and bullying the superintendent into a very specific want for a finding is just unacceptable. And using children to distribute that kind of information and those half-truths is unacceptable. I will say, and we will cover this as we get a little further down in subcommittee updates, the Pembroke School Committee and the Pembroke administration is going to add a link to our website where all information regarding teacher negotiations and these types of incidents, to the extent that they can be made public, and by the way, by law, a lot of times they cannot be made public, will be put. Taxpayers, the townspeople, have every right to be informed, and be informed in a truthful and full way. Once that is up, we will mention it at this body. I will remind people and I will remind the public that link is there. Anything from your end? So I'm going to move on. Bills are circulating and bills are moving forward.
Patrick,
I have one
think Katrina
communication
Yep.
piece,
Oh,
totally
sure.
different than what we're talking about. So we did post the CPAC, so Special Education Parents Advisory Council schedule of meetings for the parent support group. So our next one is going to be on Monday, January 27th, so next Monday at 9 a.m. at the Pembroke Community Center. And they'll all be in, I believe it's room 203, but you can always check in at the front desk. And we did use the survey data that parents did fill out to identify the best meeting time. So there was kind of a split between Mondays and Wednesdays, morning and evening. So that schedule's posted, it'll go out in newsletters. And I actually already saw it posted on social media. And I'll give a copy of this to Erin so she can include it in the materials. But we have scheduled meetings all the way through June, one per month, and we'd love to see anyone who has anything they want to talk about in terms of students with disabilities, IEPs, issues, concerns, or good things that are happening. You want to come talk about it, we are there and would love to chat with you.
Good. Thank you, Katrina. So as I said, bills are scheduling. So we do have school committee meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the school committee meeting minutes of January 7th as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sue, seconded by Katrina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie. Superintendent's report.
The first thing under my report is, in your packet, you have a copy of a new version of the Memorandum of Understanding between Pembroke Public Schools and the Pembroke Police Department. It's pretty similar to the template that is on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website, but I also included our first crack at it from 2015, and you can see that we've come a very long way in the past decade. But I know that School Resource Officer Mary Beth Simmons and Chief McDonald are here if you have any questions about it. But what the document outlines is really how we share information, how the School Resource Officer works within our building over the course of the school day, and how we work together on things that happen outside of school. And of course, it introduces our lovely comfort dog, Sasha.
Does the committee have questions on the memorandum of understanding?
I do not.
No, thank you.
I had one question. I know I thought it was a great overview, including all of those pieces from the state as a recommendation. So just one question I had was around where in the example from DESE, it had talked about having experience effectively working with youth. And so I just wonder if there could be a statement included in there somewhere about that.
Under like qualifications?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Other questions for the Chief Officer Simmons?
About just this?
Yeah, just this. No. So I do have one question, and it goes to sort of communication. I'd ask, by the way, if you guys are going to respond, to come up to the microphone so people at home can hear you. One of the vital pieces of this is to make sure that both the police department and the schools are effectively communicating, they're exchanging information, anything that's found by the officers is relayed appropriately. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how that works and how it'll work under this new memorandum of understanding?
Well, we've always had that communication, even back when I was a lieutenant. Me and
That was a
Aaron-
long time ago.
Not that long, it was 5 years ago. It worked well. It seemed like that was, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So she's very candid with me, and I'm candid with her. And whatever resources she's looking for in the police world, she's been there for me, and vice versa. We can make it more formal. We do meet, probably not as on schedule as it should be, but other than that, it's been working well.
Okay. And I think you two are consummate professionals. You guys can figure out when to meet and what the right cadence is. I guess my only other question is to Officer Simmons. You're new to the role. You've been there a couple of months. Sasha wants to go play. How have you found it? Is it what you expected? Anything we should know? Anything you're enjoying or not, maybe?
It's definitely different than patrol, I think, for the better for my part at least. It, honestly, transition-wise, I think it's gone very smoothly. I think Sasha has helped with that 1,000%, just building connections with the kids at elementary schools, high schools, you name it. It's just an icebreaker with kids too, opening up, staff too. All the schools, they all love her. Working right now with the administration in each of the building, I think has been going very well.
Great.
I had Officer Kirby before, showing me the ropes, things that he's done that have worked, things that may have not have worked. So so far, it's been a very positive experience.
That's great. Well, I just want to thank on behalf of the committee, both of you for your commitment to ensuring that we have the right resourcing in each of the schools, potentially even a conversation of expanding those resources if this continues to move forward and go well. But I think the partnership with the school system and the police department is just fundamentally important, both for the safety of our town and of our kids, but candidly, it's also sometimes how kids get to know an officer and trust an officer. So thank you both very much.
I just want to thank Officer Kirby for 12 years of his service.
Agreed. Thank you.
He did a great job. He didn't have the advantage of a dog building those relationships, but he did a great job for those 12 years.
You
He's
did a
now
fantastic
dodging our
job.
calls, just
He's busy. But, so yeah, please thank Officer Kirby for us too. So can I get a motion to approve and accept the school resource officer memorandum of understanding as presented?
Can you do as amended? I'm going to add the
Oh,
sentence that.
as amended.
I just
Yes.
had one other question.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't think it's relevant in this case, but could be in the future around if there's any conflict of interest, like if there's somebody that you know at the school or what have you, that the chief would consider that when picking an officer.
Yeah,
Right, so they go through the same ethics piece that we do on our
So
end
it
as well.
It's
isn't needed.
automatic. It's
Okay,
not
got
needed.
it.
That's
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
So can I get a motion to accept and approve the school resource officer memorandum of understanding as amended?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Sue, seconded by Allison. Is there any further discussion?
Do you have any questions?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie.
Since we have Officer Simmons and Chief McDonald here, does anybody have any other school safety questions they want to ask?
Do you want me to
Yeah,
start?
go ahead.
Okay. So I, being in the schools as much as I am and my kids, we've seen people walking their dogs. I've seen kids out on the trails.
Use your loud voice, Allison.
Kids out on the trails. What can we do to help, protect the students when they're on campus for, what are people allowed to do walking through schools, walking their dogs, and then also something that I brought up, because the cross-country trails that we have meets are on property that can be hunted, and so I don't know if that's a thing that families are aware of when their kids are out there training and or on meets of the schools. And so I'm just kind of wondering, first, safety of students, what that looks like, and maybe
I
what
think the
we can-
cross-country part of it is all timing. I think in all the years I've been here, I've never had an incident where they're doing their runs, we're running into people hunting out there. Again, I'm not a hunter. I don't really know what season's what. Some of the guys are big hunters and they know that, so it hasn't been a problem. I do think that could be a concern if there's that going on at the same time, people running through the woods. They're not wearing vests, they're not, so that could be a problem, but it hasn't been. As far as walking generally in schools, walking their dogs, that's more of a town manager thing and posting signs and going that route. Really not a law enforcement thing. I don't want to be locking up old ladies with two dogs going down the street. It's just not the optic I want to give off.
Right.
We would think that, depends on where they're walking. I mean, Learning Lane is a public way. If they get into the back of the school, getting close to the school, that might be a little bit different. But signs matter, getting the town manager on board, having some type of collaboration with the schools and how they're going to handle it. A lot of times, staff will just talk to the people and it's a done deal, and not necessarily bring us in there, because people get defensive when police come up, especially if they think this is not a big deal and why are you making a big deal out of it. And we don't want to escalate things like that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's we want people to be able to use, the schools, but we also want kids to be able to access the property for recess and, sports and all of those things, and being, safe. One thing that I want to bring up from, again, just being in the schools is doors being propped open. And so I think my understanding is sometimes it's done unintentionally, but sometimes for recess or whatnot. So what can we do to help enforce that the doors are shut and always shut and have, either fobbed or keyed or whatnot, from a committee safety, standpoint of having the schools completely secured?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important that, school safety is more important than, leaving the door open for recess. We have to figure out a way to keep the doors locked, and maybe, I don't know, what's your suggestion? Because I feel like that's a priority. We can't have people coming into the building in the middle of the day with the door propped open.
Right, so there's a couple of different pieces to it, right? So there's human habit of propping the door open or not wanting to walk from your car. There's equipment that isn't functioning necessarily at its intended goal. And then there's just the custodian forgot to lock the door, right? So there's kind of three pieces to get at. I think Officer Simmons has been going around our buildings and kind of informing us if she sees any issues kind of with the physical plan. So this door is not locking because it's not mechanically able to lock, and those have been addressed. I think it's the human behavior piece where we struggled, and we have consistently struggled with students and staff propping doors open. And I think one of the things, the strategies that we've talked about is there more steps that we can take? So obviously reinforcing with staff that doors need to remain closed during school hours, and then really, for lack of a better word, policing that with staff and making sure that if a door is propped open, that the necessary actions are taken to remind staff. Obviously, there's a whole process that we can go through, but I do think that we get comfortable in our routines, and I think that's the part where we could really tighten it up on our end, and really reminding and reinforcing to staff and students that the safest building is a building that is really secure from the outside in. And I would anticipate that there'll be a couple of budget items during our facilities budget to include some additional fobbing of doors. You'll remember when we did fob the doors, there's 2 doors at each of the 4 schools, and I think 3 doors at the high school that are fobbed. And when those doors were selected, they were selected for a variety of reasons, main entrance, staff entrance, but we are getting requests from the teacher level for the recess door to be one of those doors. So I anticipate building that out a little bit as we go into the next couple budget years.
That's fair. But also, I think to Allison's point about, people walking their dogs, I think it would go a long way if we could talk with the town manager about signs.
Sure, so we have signs on our playground that say you can't use our playground during school hours. I would envision a similar type of situation. I can work with the town manager and the DPW to get those signs made.
I also think maybe having a couple of signs on the running trails. This is an active running
Sure.
trail. Yep. Please be aware, type of thing. I mean, to the chief's point, I've
Great
never
idea.
heard of an incident out there.
Correct.
But I think just making folks aware that there may be kids or candidly townspeople. I've run the trails myself, right? Sure. Running the trails, I think that's important. That does bring up, I guess, one more question. I think I had one for Officer Simmons. As you've been doing your walks and sort of your checks, anything that you're finding, is that getting addressed? Is it being addressed timely? Do you feel like there's good responsiveness?
Yeah, Any issues that I've had security-wise with the buildings has been addressed either immediately. There was one door at Hobmock one day that there was a miscommunication about with the fob and like a sensor there, which the custodian was able to show us why. I thought it was malfunctioning and not locking, but there was a reason behind it. It was addressed immediately. The only other thing I know with the school's already working is some like the PA system, getting
Yeah.
things like that. That's already in the works. Other than that, I haven't found anything that I've brought up that hasn't been addressed.
Great, thank you.
And one other thing I know we've talked about briefly is signage for like the traffic on Learning Lane, you know, like human and car traffic, and also the fact that like Learning Lane, yeah, I'm sure you can talk to us about that, the Hunger Games of running in and out of there, but the fact that there's not like and again, this isn't police necessarily, but not, I don't think there's proper signage of school zones, speed limits, flashing crosswalk signs, but that's kind of, again, not necessarily. a
Sure,
police
yeah.
issue,
So
but
we've
school
been
safety in
working
essence.
with the DPW and the town manager to get better signage on Learning Lane. There is no electricity that runs that way, which is why we don't have a lighted Pembroke High School sign down the end of Learning Lane, but there are definitely some solar options that other towns are using so that the flashing light is there. We've discussed potentially relocating that crosswalk that does cross from the high school over to Hobbamuck. I'm not going to say to the junior lot because there is no such thing as a junior parking lot at
But
Pembroke
there
High
was,
School.
I mean, let's be real, there is.
But there's definitely a couple of improvements that we can make on Learning Lane to make it safer for our newer drivers and for what is lovingly referred to as the Hunger Games at dismissal time.
Well,
So-
'cause even like, you know, the bus drop off at Hobbamock, cars, the lights are flashing and cars
Yes.
drive right by, and I saw it today, and it drives me insane, because it's like your own kids.
If you
So-
could get a plate number, we can be
The
still
police
waiting
department has
people
been
up.
really good with those that are driving by the bus with the flashing lights on. We have definitely reached out to them, and we've had habitual offenders. Sometimes those offenders are employees, so.
Ryan, I have to ask, right, because I saw your reaction. It's a problem.
Getting out of the parking lot itself from the senior lot is, of course, a nightmare when it's everyone funneling out of one. But we had an accident earlier this year
Yep.
with a student crossing the street, and there is no sort of organization of the students who are crossing the street. When everyone's flooding out of the back sides, hallways, and all the underclassmen, because I won't say juniors, flood over to the other parking lot, there's no sort of organization, and it also doesn't tend to stop the cars or buses on either side of the road. I remember last year, you cross the street with people and their cars aren't stopping really, but also students aren't waiting for cars to
To
stop.
stop.
So a sign of some kind, letting them know there's a crosswalk here, or telling students to wait.
We
anything
talked
like
about
that.
putting an administrator outside for a little bit of time, right? Changing student
Behavior.
behavior is what
Yeah,
has
I-
happened.
So, and it's a good perspective, right, because you're living it every single day. Well, we're talking about the theoretical, and you're talking about your daily life. In the underclassmen lot, it's probably worse.
I didn't spend much time there. I got my pass to the senior lot as quickly as possible.
Smart man.
On the police end, you see the traffic sign in front of Town Hall, the smiley face.
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
I mean, that makes me slow down, so I don't know what you think.
Okay, it makes everybody slow down to get the smiley face.
Yeah, I want that kudo, yeah. But we do have traffic grants that I receive every year, and I can put in for a sign. For
That's a
little-
great
that's a
idea.
great
I think that's a great idea, Chief.
love it.
That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
because I wasn't aware that Learning Lane is 20 miles an hour, the whole thing is only 20, like, and it's,
20 plus 20 plus 20?
and nobody.
That's what you think it is
Nobody.
sometimes.
When there is no sign, that is the speed limit.
Well, yeah, because it's, the whole street is this school zone.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the other part about getting back to the hunting thing, a lot of misconceptions about, you have a range on Forest Streets, and you could hear it.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure the two former principal and principal, got complaints about that, maybe boats are straying in the field area where, I don't know if that's the case, but it sounds like it. So people get nervous about that.
One thing I was wondering about in terms of the, I know with the track piece, that the timing doesn't usually line up for track this season, but I know that there's also student groups that just organize and go run. So I don't know if there's avenues for us to communicate about wearing
Yeah, we can-
something,
we
right,
can-
something orange.
I think we can make sure that the cross-country coaches are well aware that this is the case. Now, keep in mind, we haven't had the turkey trot in several years, although I heard a rumor it might be coming back. But we did have races out there in the late November timeframe, which is deer season. Turkey season's usually before that. So I think it's just good to make sure that everyone's very aware. And then the signage, I mean, like most hunters are going to be super responsible. I mean, if they know this is a trail, a cross-country trail, they're going to go deeper in. And thankfully, knock on wood, right, we haven't had an incident, but I think making folks aware is key.
Just knowing that our cross-country trail and the trail that kids run for practices, I mean, I think they were out there even today, are public land that is huntable, and it's perfectly legal for hunters to be out there. So just the fact that they're coexisting could cause a problem.
Allison, I think High Street's even more dangerous. They run full
Yes.
blast on High Street.
No, they come out. They come
Yeah.
out my
You see
neighborhood
them, yeah.
and come right out on Orchard on High. And yeah, it's
I just don't want people panicked. That's the
No.
only reason that I made the point, right?
The timing doesn't line up for the most part.
well, but the
Yeah.
practices could because
The practices
they practice year round.
Right,
The
and that's the
distance
piece
runners
that
for
I think
track
is-
practice on those trails
Year
all,
round.
Yeah.
all school year.
They do.
Is that public knowledge that it is a hunting ground? Because I mean, I don't run cross country, but I know I've never heard anything about that or anyone mention it. Like, do students know to be careful and watching out for that?
I don't know. I know because I live there, but I don't know.
The land surrounding most of our schools is hunting ground. All of the perimeter of north is also. I think that we can do a better job making sure the kids have that information though.
Yeah,
Parents.
I think parents knowing, kids knowing, I think coaches knowing, I think the more we can kind of get that word out, the better.
Might make the distance runners run faster.
Okay, moving on. Are there any other questions? So that,
Patrick, could I
Yeah.
throw in maybe being a
Yes.
little parochial, and I have a tendency to walk my dogs between 7 and 8 o'clock on West Street. My comparison as a kid growing up, as we call it, New England Dragway. They're either coming 27 to get to 36 or 36 to get to 27. I've literally had people between putting makeup on their phones. I've jumped into bushes so I don't get run over. One woman stopped and said, "I didn't see you." I had 220-pound Siberian Huskies on leashes. I'm a 240-pound guy, and she said she didn't see me. We had a dog killed down there, a few months back. Again, I go back to when Officer Flannery was here. He would always kind of stick a cruiser up there, once a week, maybe twice a week, and it kept people, again, they never knew if he was going to be there. So the New England Dragway factor went away. So I'm being a little parochial defending the Bryantville side, but
Surprise factor.
anything you could do.
So Dave, that's always driven by requests from people in certain neighborhoods.
Okay.
And we will assign, Sergeant will assign a car there certain hours, especially if your certificate award time frame is probably best for us to be there.
Yeah, the buses pick the kids up right about 8:05.
Problem is that shift change, so.
That's
Yeah.
that's always my
So
fear.
Probably a little after 8 or a little bit before 8.
Yeah. But again, if they see a cruiser there, I think,
100%.
instinct is going to slow them down because nobody, of course, you probably have to write 1 or 2 tickets and
And it's usually the
they'll
same
smarten
people
up.
kind of from, like you said,
Oh, yeah.
routine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah. I think Sasha's ready to go home. So if there are no more questions, I'm just going to thank both of you for coming and kind of sharing this information, listening to us. Sasha, baby girl, thank you.
Thanks for having
Go
us.
home. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome to stay. You just don't have to.
No, we'll be going.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was having some menial issues, so.
Next under my report is the elementary budget presentation. So our 3 elementary school principals are here. I just want to front load, this is your first FY26 department budget, so I will give you the same spiel I give you every year. What we do is we ask the administrators to put together the budget that really reflects their goals in moving their buildings forward. I don't ask them to get bogged down in the details of how much it would cost to do those things. That's for us to kind of vet out at the end as we start to talk about priorities, but really to put forward what they believe they need in their buildings to move their programs forward. So with that being said, the budget is created in a silo, but you will see as we go through, next you'll see secondary, you'll see teaching and learning, you'll see student services, you will see some of the things repeated, which I think shows you that more than one department is interested in it as a priority, so.
I also, if I may, as we get these budget proposals, and I think it's really important for people out in the community as well as folks that come to listen, what happens when these proposals are made and the sort of wish list items is they form our level 1, level 2, level 3 sort of priorities, right, on what can we afford, what can't we afford, where it's going to be. This is our first school budget kickoff. I do want to say fiscal 26 is going to be really tight and is going to be really difficult, whether it's from a school perspective or a town perspective. And it won't just be Pembroke, right? I'm seeing signs from the Commonwealth that it's going to be very tight. We're getting sort of early warnings that the budget scenarios are going to be very tight. A lot of the federal money is drying up because a lot of the ARPA money is done, right? It's sustained from several years. But I just want us to understand that and realize that while we take all of the requests very seriously, we're going to have to be very judicious because we have an obligation and a fiduciary obligation to the town, to the taxpayer, as well as to the students in the district. So with that, don't ask for anybody. No, I'm kidding. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having us. I can't believe we're already here again in January. I will say, right before we turn the slide, Ashley, go back to the first slide.
Before we turn the slide, yeah.
That's okay. I'll just explain it that usually we have just kids on the front page, and Sasha made the front page. Which
I
is
love
great.
it.
She's up on the top right there, so she's a big part of our school community. So
I noted that when I was looking at it
Yeah,
over the
yeah.
weekend. Yeah.
We didn't even coordinate that.
yeah, I know, right? We did not coordinate that.
I copied the pattern.
So the way this kind of happens is the 3 building principals kind of get together and we kind of talk about our individual buildings, and also we're seeing trends that make sense to us among all 3. So a lot of what we do obviously is very, very similar. So you're going to be hearing those, those pieces throughout our presentation today. So we're going to walk you through, number 1, the enrollment, some historical information about where we've been in the past, some data pieces, how we arrived at these, and then really kind of delineating our 26 priorities moving forward. So this is really a joint effort, and we spent some significant amounts of time, looking at what we have for this year. So a little bit about our enrollment and our just number of homerooms per se. Our enrollment has really pretty much stayed very, very similar from year to year. We're not seeing huge trends there. And if you take a look at the number of homerooms and homeroom teachers in each of our buildings, that's pretty much stayed the same within maybe 1 or 2 over the course of the many, many years. So I'm not seeing huge differences moving into next year either. If you take a look at class sizes for FY25, you're going to see that you have between 30 and 40-ish kids, between the 3 different buildings. We're all running very similar. Obviously, Hobmark's just a little bit less, but I think that's not a huge number for us to take a look at, right? So I will say that North has just a few more students that are not reflected on here because of the preschool. We kind of exclude them from the budget presentation. In this part of the budget presentation, they're obviously in the B and Jessica's report when she does student services.
Bless you.
But I think it gives a good idea of how many students are in the building when you take a K through 6 model. So very, very similar through all 3 buildings. And then as we move to the projected class sizes for FY26, you're going to see very, very little movement. I think, Brian Phil's looking at potentially 10 under what they had this year. Hobmark's staying exactly the same. I don't know how you do it, Ashley. And then North Pembroke may be picking up 5 additional students. So not a lot of movement there. But if you take a look at some of those trends right now, some of that movement is allowing for the potential for us to take a look at staffing in each of the buildings. So if you take a look at grade 6 at Hobmark, we could probably do business having 2 staff members at that grade level. Right now it's at 3. And then at North, we're looking at, I guess we call it a bubble sometimes, in grade 2 moving up to grade 3. If you take a look at your priorities that you've kind of set out as far as class sizes, I think we're looking right where we need to be if we could do that at 3 next year instead of the 4 that we have this year.
Can I ask you a question on that, though?
Sure.
Because I unfortunately have been through this a couple of times.
Sure, absolutely.
So the first thing I do when we're making a reduction is I go back 4 years, right? So I assume one of the teachers will have to loop, right? Because you've got a class of 61 going into 5th grade with 2, will probably require 3. The 64 is going to go to the 61. The 49, though, will go in grade 3, which...
It'll flip back. right? So that then this, when 2 moves to 3 the following year, this teacher comes back.
No, that's my
Yeah.
point, but you're gonna,
You're right.
there's
It's not
gonna have to
necessarily
be.
moving with the same grade, but there are definitely staff
No,
that are
yeah,
going
oh,
to
I'm
switch
sorry, yeah,
levels
so
every year.
you're not necessarily looping with the same grade, but you're going to have to do some reassessment to get
Correct.
the numbers to work, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Can I just ask just to
Sure.
clarify, so are these the actual, what actually we're thinking is going to happen, or?
This is the
what's
projected amount for
current-
what we have right now.
This is projected staffing. And which one, the only one I see that could potentially change is Habermock 6?
Right,
How
but
much is-
also what Michael said was there's currently 4 sections of second grade at North that would go to 3 sections of.
Okay, so that's another one that could potentially change?
Yes.
It is a 4 now. On the FY '26, it's projected as a 3.
Okay.
And
All
the
right.
current,
But
Fourth
it
current
doesn't
second
have the
grade has-
asterisk. Is
it
there
does
any
not have
others
the
that don't have an
asterisk.
asterisk?
No, there's
Asterisk?
just 2.
the 2,
Yeah.
okay. And so, just out of curiosity, oh, never mind, that's, well, I was looking at 6th grade, the 56, that wouldn't,
28's too high.
it's too high. All right.
But these are, to answer your question, these are the projected numbers, and we take a look at the numbers over the course of the summer, and we're obviously in contact with Erin if we are seeing that that's getting above. You love those
Right, and
emails.
we keep an eye on the kindergarten number, right? Kindergarten registrations are just happening now. That really kind of heats up as we get into March, but it would never make sense to cut a 6th grade teacher if we're going to have to add a kindergarten teacher, right? So we would be obviously looking K through 6 at our staffing. For not just this year, but usually a year or 2 out. You don't want to make a 1-year reduction, as Patrick just alluded to.
so given the, I know at least at Hallmark, the 6th grade model, how does that work with 2 teachers?
We'd have to look differently at the model.
So we're changing how we teach 6th grade, like,
So up until this year, everybody taught 6th grade a little bit differently across the 3 buildings. And we are getting, I think, a great amount of feedback from our staff that are in that model. And there are definitely positives and negatives to it. So we will take all of that into account as we start to figure out what it could look like with 2 teachers.
I will also say, right, this is a great example of why, although from year to year we didn't have a huge reduction this time in enrollment, which is good, right? But it's a really good example of why you may get a 10 or a 15% decrease year on year in your enrollment, but it's hard to make the reductions because they cascade throughout so many sections, and not just in elementary, but it's even harder, I think, in the middle school or high school. So sometimes there has to be successive years of enrollment reductions in order to make staffing reductions. I do think when we presented a voluminous amount of data during the budget last year to show that we have kept our class sizes pretty consistent, even though enrollment has gone down, which means we've made appropriate reductions, enrollment reductions in staffing in order to keep class sizes about the same. Otherwise, class sizes would be going down, and they're not. They're holding steady. So this is a good example, though, of why you can't just immediately take a reduction.
And I will say too, the 2 teachers at 6th grade is not something new at Habermock. I think 4 years ago, we only
Yeah.
had 2 6th grade teachers at Habermock as well. So we do have familiarity with a model that works, but it definitely would be different than what we're doing now.
Absolutely. So the next slide really talks about the previously funded elementary priorities. So these are things that we've come to you before and asked over the past several years, really focusing on the achievement, but also the social emotional. And some of those big asks that you've been able to come and meet us with would be the addition of the 1.0 full-time employees for the reading specialists at each elementary school. In a couple of slides later, we'll kind of show you, how we're making a difference there. We also took a look at the science of reading and some professional development around that, specific to the U-Fly, DIBBLES, iReady, ELA, and the No Red Ink. So the U-Fly and the DIBBLES kind of go hand in hand with our new reading program, K through 2. And the DIBBLES is more of our assessment of how we actually are able to understand where the kids are in real time as far as their reading abilities at those younger grade levels as well, with the ability to kind of tier up to grades 3 and 4, having a better understanding around their reading comprehension as well. So that's kind of where we were at for achievement before, as well as we've done a lot of talk at this table around Open Sci-Ed and the training of the staff there, and we're a few years in. Mary Beth has been instrumental in helping us with that. So that's a lot of the stuff you funded in the past for academics. For the social emotional, you also met us where we needed to be, and we're able to, in the past, provide us with a 1.0 social worker in each elementary building. again, instrumental, as well as the paraprofessional staff that was assigned as far as our Titan Lab. So we're a couple of years running now into our Titan Labs, and Titan Labs, as you all know, is more of a preventative measure and making sure we provide the support to the kids before they're really having difficulty and really can't access the in-classroom instruction. That has been wonderful as well as the implementation of Second Step, which is part of our anti-bullying curriculum, which came on board a couple of years ago, and it's been very well accepted by the staff as well. That's where we were in the past. That's what we were asking for before. And then I'm going to, at this point, I think, hand it over to Jen and talk about some of those reading specialist numbers.
Yeah, so we'd like to include this just because part of our budget is always reminding you what you've previously funded in order that we would like for it to stay. We'd like that to be maintained.
Very diplomatic, Jen.
So part of the reason why, especially with the reading specialist, we can't say enough about our reading specialists. They are just like rock solid, amazing humans who do so much for our staff and students, and just the amount of kids they're able to service and work with and provide and use all this science reading and knowledge and the dibbles and just taking it all and really informing our instruction and taking it to a level that I had never seen it before for sure. So this is just kind of us proving their need, just reminding you of their importance.
Can I ask you a question on it, though?
Yes.
So
Go
it's first of all interesting, and I love to see the growth, right? From 1 to 2 or K through 2 up to 3, and then at least at Brineville and Hubbamuck, we were able to go to grade 4. But in North, it was only grade 3. Is that just because there was so much need K through 3, and you just didn't have enough?
Right now, it is
People?
well, it's not that we don't have enough people, it's just the managing of the scheduling.
Yeah.
So right now, there's a very large number in K through 3, and I actually have been working with our reading specialist about how do we actually get her to grade 4. We have some ideas we're kind of kicking around right now that will kind of give some flexibility in her schedule to be able to get up there.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Sure.
And just a quick question about, obviously this is making a huge difference with reading instruction, but big picture, any thoughts on achievement differences that you've seen, like just broad strokes, not percentages?
Yeah. I, not even necessarily just achievement, like
Yes.
just that little pocket, but like IST, student support, special ed referrals.
Yeah.
Like being able to target the literacy at the K to 2 in a much more systematic, explicit way is definitely showing up in other ways.
I was going to say potentially even, I don't want to say behavior type of things, right? Because when kids are struggling, you might see more of that. So I imagine that there might be a reduction in some of those pieces as well as kids are naturally feeling successful.
And I think, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
Jen's going to talk about it a little bit more when we get to the next page, but just thinking about that IST process, when a teacher comes to the table saying, a child's having difficulty with either reading or math, they're looking at administration to kind of find them that level of support, that tier 2 support, to meet them where they're at. And a lot of times prior to reading specialists, we didn't have a whole lot of tricks up our sleeve to kind of offer them and provide that intervention. So with the reading specialist, if a student is being brought to that IST table in need of intervention, in the past it may have been a special ed referral because that's really all we had to offer, but we now have that middle step of providing tiered instructional support before the referral internally.
That's fantastic, right? Like I think when our kind of tier 1 and tier 2 supports are doing well, all students do well. So it's great to hear that those pieces are all helping that along.
Would you be able to summarize and just kind of explain the Second Step program and what that entails? I'm just not aware, and I want to be informed.
Absolutely. And Ryan, you probably were in elementary school when we didn't have it. So it's a great question for you. So it is something that we actually took a look at. So it's really about social emotional learning. So how kids develop peer relationships with each other, and also kind of how do they reach their goals. So how do we set a goal? How do we achieve a goal? Right now it's through an online format. So the way it kind of works is either the entire grade level or a specific classroom works together, and we're able to kind of review. There's some short videos that are kind of student friendly. And then the teachers are able to do some extension activities based upon that. And it's really kind of empowering students to kind of really make decisions for themselves, and to kind of find trusted adults within the building.
Awesome. Thank you.
Used to be like ancient black and white cards.
Yeah.
They had stone tablets when I was there, Ryan. Don't worry about it.
Picture cards, yeah.
So with the areas we would like to maintain, our wishful thinking, we would love to have the 4 specialist rotation in some manner. Brianville is living stream this term, and the kids are definitely excited. Just having that 4th block, scheduling wise, it just has proven to be a benefit. So if we were ever able to get some sort of 4th specialist back, we would love that. Given the success of the reading specialists, we would love to also have a math one, because that we would ideally see the same benefits in both. You mentioned the behaviors before, so even with the success of being able to meet some of our kids' needs better, we are definitely seeing an increase in behaviors, especially amongst our younger kiddos. Our kindergartners come to us from varying situations. Some have never been in school before at all, some just part, some half day, then you're going to a full day. It takes some time for them to adjust and learn the routines, and it's a really long day for them. We also have just sort of like a newer group of students that just sort of have some different anxiety struggles and behavior struggles and ability to maintain stamina, because we're used to, quick satisfaction of the next reel is on its way, and just being able to take all these pieces in a classroom with other kids while still teaching and doing the curriculum. We're doing everything we can to support, but having some behavior specialist, someone who can focus on that behavior and is more of an expert in that field, we think would be beneficial to each building. And, we're going to go big or go home. So really what would be great would be if we could, seeing the need of our students, we think it could be a benefit to explore having a substantially separate program within the district focused on social emotional. It would allow us to support them within district, meet their needs, and hopefully have it be a program that's more of a transition where they're, we can meet them where they are, get them where they need to be, and then get them back with us. So this would be our tier 1.
Do you guys have any questions on that? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ashley will go into the program more. Yeah. Just if it's about that.
Go ahead, Sue.
So my question is, just theoretically, I was thinking of, obviously, I don't envy teachers today because, the job is so difficult because there are so many of those issues in the classroom. And but I'm just wondering if you did create a social emotional, a substantially separate special education program. That's a long sentence.
It is.
Then how many students would be pulled out of the regular everyday classroom? Like, could we, and I'm just throwing it out there, I don't know if it's possible or not, could we pull students out of that to put into this and then potentially reduce the number of teachers needed in the regular, I don't know.
So just keep in mind, when you look at the numbers for Havelock, because Havelock houses our district-wide programs, those grade level based homerooms include students that are in our program. So most students, whether in our PTC programs or our PACE program, do access the regular ed classroom for some period of time during the day. Sometimes it's just snack and morning meeting, or sometimes it's science and social studies. But so if you're looking at, let's say, 5th grade at Havelock in particular, where you see there's 51 kids this year, some of those kids could be program kids. So program kids are still assigned to homeroom.
So that wouldn't be substantially separate.
They may have some of their instruction in a substantially separate room, but they would still be attached to a gen ed classroom.
Okay, all right. I was just throwing the idea.
I'm going to go into more detail about the social emotional program too, so.
Yeah. My question's about another piece. The behaviorist at each building, I was just wondering, would that be like somebody with a particular licensure? Would it be a BCBA? Would it be like what would they be? When you mean behaviorist, what do you mean?
Ideally, we're asking for either a BCBA or an LABA, so the name is interchangeably used depending on your state licensure. So
Okay.
a BCBA is more of a Massachusetts
Yeah,
term, where an
what I
LABE
know.
is a similar title.
got it.
Flipped, LABA, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
BCBA is
All good.
BCBA is
Behavioral. Yeah.
So just for everybody's knowledge, right, because not everybody knows these acronyms, could one of you explain what is a BCBA or what is an LABA?
It's up to you.
You don't have a mic, so.
Yeah.
So a BCBA is a board-certified behavior analyst, and a LABA is a licensed applied behavior analyst. So they're very similar. It's just based on licensure and states. Massachusetts has a licensure within kind of a teacher licensure for behaviorists, but they are experts and receive training, et cetera. I see, Katrina, you can
Yeah.
certainly chime in,
They
but
take data. I think that's the,
Yeah.
they
They
find
analyze the
like
data,
the
so
root
it's less-
cause of
yeah.
something so that they can find the interventions that then support the child. So it's really based on not just like a feeling, but data that is being taken.
yeah, they often look at the function of a behavior to try to analyze, what happened before, why is this behavior occurring, and how do we shape that kind of behavior. So the model we use now most often is more of a consultation model. So they are looking at data collected by staff members, paras, teachers, substantially separate classrooms to try to analyze why a behavior is happening and then how we can shift that behavior.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure everybody knew what those acronyms were. So, sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to throw another one at you now,
Yeah.
in our tier 2, RBT.
Oh, yeah.
So if we cannot, if we wouldn't be able to get someone for the whole, like every single building, one of the things that we've had in the past when we had ESSER funds was we had an RBT, which is a registered behavior technician, who would be able to take the plans and like implement them and model them and demonstrate them for our paras and staff. And we have to share a person if,
If they had
funds
to,
allowed
they
it.
share.
If
We
you had
could,
to.
if we had to share, we could.
Sharing's caring.
And then we would, if we had to do a halftime math and an additional halftime reading, well, just anything to help bulk up the supports, just from some of the deficits that you're seeing and it's not like a COVID and it's not a learning interrupted, it's just kids are coming at us at a really wide variety of background and knowledge and schooling and not schooling, and giving our teachers any of the supports that we can to ensure they're able to do the best job they can in the classroom would be our goal.
And I think a lot of these supports will keep kids in district.
Right.
That's
Which,
the goal.
And I'm going to talk about that when we get to the substantially
Yeah,
separate.
so like, and I know as we go through this process, going through it for the first time last year, like how we keep this as a need in town to really advocate for the students and the needs of the students and not let this, just because it is a big ask, fall to the wayside because it's going to be expensive, but I want to make sure that we are aware of the difference this could make long-term of being able to keep kids in town.
Well, I think that's part of the business case and the cost-benefit analysis that has to be done on these types of requests, right?
Yeah, I think one piece I'm thinking of is, obviously kids do better when they get support earlier, and I think long-term, that would be a payoff. In addition to kids just doing better at school and teachers having an easier time, their parents also probably having an easier time in some cases. I know math was an area that we had talked about that came up during the special education presentation that Jessica did. So I was glad to see the math interventionist because it does sound like an area of need. Yeah, I think building on some of the needs that you've been seeing, this seems like a response that makes sense, but definitely want to hear more about it as time goes on.
Just out of curiosity, do you think a teacher would prefer like a larger classroom of students and then the substantially separate program, or would it be more beneficial for the kids to stay the way they are? Like, I'm just thinking along the lines of funding.
That might be a great segue, actually, into
Sure, so I can circle back to that if I
Okay.
don't answer your question. So we, at the 3 buildings, have been seeing, like Jen mentioned, a large increase in students with social emotional difficulties. A lot of them are qualifying for special education. A lot of them are being housed internally at our individual buildings. What we are running into is that some of these students require a more restrictive learning environment in which their special education supports are really therapeutic in nature and tailored to either the behaviors that they're demonstrating because of some type of social emotional disability or academic deficits that are also present as well. So as most of you know, we do house at Habermock 5 district-wide special education programs. I should say special education classrooms. There are 2 different strands. So we have the PACE program that houses students who have more intellectual or cognitive disabilities and are really more on a life skills track, working on those, functioning communication skills and everyday living skills. We also have what we call the transition program, which is almost an in-between the PACE classroom and a moderate special education program. That program has slowly evolved into kind of a catch-all for students that don't necessarily belong in general education as an inclusion student, but are too cognitively high to be in a PACE program working on life skills. So the majority of the students in that program really do belong in that transition program, but we do have a handful of kids that collectively we feel would benefit from a more therapeutic setting. What we find happens is because those therapeutic supports aren't necessarily embedded in a transition program, a lot of times those students end up out of district, either at a private day school, a collaborative setting, or even another public school substantially separate social emotional program. So for example, Marshfield has one of these programs. So if we have a student that requires a social emotional substantially separate classroom, we at times place students from Pembroke Public Schools in Marshfield in their public school setting to access those supports.
And what's the cost for that?
Jess?
Lots of money.
So a collaborative is about $60,000 plus transportation. Private day are between 100 and 140 now a year, plus most of private day programs are not geographically located close to Pembroke, so it's a pretty hefty transportation costs.
In the Marshfield program?
They're running about 50 in the 50s.
If we were to set up one of these programs, could we take kids from surrounding towns and other areas?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we could tuition in, but we'd want to make sure that.
That
Yeah.
we've got, right.
Not year one.
It's something we.
So the 3 primary benefits to having a program like this in Pembroke, as I mentioned, the tailored special education approach, although we're meeting the students that we have in our district-wide programs where they're at, we're providing social worker support and behavior support, but really tailoring it as a therapeutic program would definitely target their needs more cohesively. The second piece is about keeping students in district, right? So we want those students and those families to feel that sense of community. And a lot of times what happens when you send a child out of district for whatever reason is they lose those ties to Pembroke. So not only do they not know the kids that are living next door or in their neighborhood, they're also missing out on some of those just public school opportunities, whether it's after school dances or it's PTO events. So although they're still technically allowed to come to PTO events, we find that they don't often still access them unless they have a sibling or a relative in the building. Again, parents would be able to gain easier access to supports while they were in Pembroke, so whether it's home services, or we're really just able to kind of keep them more tied to our community rather than sending them to an out-of-district
One
placement.
more question,
Yeah,
because I'm going to make a suggestion that budget sub takes this and kind of does a cost benefit to sort of understand, what the upfront costs are, what the payback period is, sort of all the business stuff. But in doing that, would we be able to bring kids that are currently out of district back?
So that's number 3.
Oh, I'm here for you.
So theoretically, that would be a goal down the road, to be able to bring students who are out of district now back in district. Jessica and I had talked a lot about what that looks like, and it really is dependent on the IEP team and a parent agreeing to give Pembroke a try again. There's other ways to go about it, but it is more of a drawn-out process. If we feel we can support their needs and the parent doesn't agree, we can certainly, file for hearing or mediation, but that is a more drawn-out process. One of the bigger pieces of this is that if we are able to start a program based on the numbers of potential in-district students versus the out-of-district students, we then have a program for them to come back to. So once you have that IEP meeting and you feel like you can have that conversation with the parent, you're more equipped to say, we have X, Y, and Z. Why don't you come and observe this program and see if you feel like it would be a good fit for your child. Right now, it's all hypotheticals because we don't have that program for them to observe or even for them to put any weight in. So theoretically, it would be a cost saving over time to be able to start to bring some of those families back, but it wouldn't be an immediate, every district we've outplaced for social emotional reasons would be able to come back. It would be more of
I
a
wouldn't even
process.
include those in the revenue portion of this, because
Okay.
like if somebody does come back, it's kind of gravy at that point, right? I mean, I don't mean to be rude about that, but it's true. I think part of what we've got to be careful of with stuff like this, and this is where I think in budget sub we can do some analytics around it. This sounds awesome, right? And we go and we make an investment, it's a substantial investment, and then the savings don't materialize. So now you're, whatever it is, $800,000-900,000 in, but there isn't the savings that you counted on to offset it, and now you've created a wider issue and a wider problem. So I think as we go through it, I think we would need some concrete savings targets. We'd have to demonstrate that we can meet and are meeting those savings targets, because that's justifying the spend, right? And getting us to the break-even point and what have you. So it's really, it's thinking about it from a business perspective, but at the same time ensuring that we're not creating a bill for future committees and, future taxpayers to have to foot.
Sure. And our proposal for next year would be to roll out one classroom of this program. So
Okay.
we're not looking to roll
Start
out.
small.
Start small.
Yep.
Know that we have students potentially in district that after IEP meetings and conversations with families would be good candidates for this program, and would fit in the age requirement of one classroom. So they would have to be within 48 months birth date wise of each other. Talking to the other two principals and Jessica, we have spoken about students that we feel would be a better candidate for this type of substantially separated versus the one they're currently in. But again, that has to happen through the IEP process and have a conversation with families. So essentially what we're asking for to be able to start this program would be a full-time special education teacher, a full-time registered behavior technician. So that is essentially a trained paraprofessional. So it's not someone to analyze data and all that. It's more a paraprofessional who has specific licensure and training to work with students with this type of need. In addition to those 2 staff members that would be housed in this classroom, we're also looking to have a 0.5 behavior analyst and a 0.5 social worker to meet the needs of the students in that program. Those 2 lines could certainly be absorbed with kind of the current model that we have in district if needed. We do contract out right now with Pilgrim Area Collaborative and have a BCBA/LABA that we work with. So certainly there are other options rather than hiring our own 0.5 to kind of tease out her contracted hours that way. It does end up costing more when we're contracting services out because we are paying an hourly rate versus our own in-district employee, but to start, we could certainly get creative about what the model looks like. Additionally, a 0.5 social worker with the numbers of, that would really be dependent on the numbers of students we would be able to start the program with and their level of need. Right now at Hobbamock, our full-time social worker and full-time school psychologist work with all of our district-wide programs, so they have the burden of not only just the traditional Hobbamock kids, but also those 5 district-wide classrooms as well. And we're talking about adding another classroom onto that. So we certainly have, and again, professional development, obviously, to get staff trained. So we certainly have some flexibility in some flexibility in what the model looks like, you know, depending on enrollment numbers, but in a perfect world, to get this classroom up and running with fidelity, we feel very strongly that we would need all of these things.
Sue, did you have a question?
I just was wondering, has anybody gotten any data on other districts that have this program and how many out-of-district placements they have? Like, you know, how many people from out-of-district come to them? You know, I'm just curious. That
Like how many Marshfield had?
Marshfield accept? How many does Marshfield accept out of district?
It's really dependent on your resources and your enrollment numbers, right? So you don't want to overburden the classroom and students that you have in district. So it really is dependent. And then again, the age piece of it, making sure that students in the classroom are within that 48-month.
I think I'm also thinking along the lines of ways that we could possibly fund this, and if we are getting out-of-district placements.
Yeah, you wouldn't get any out-of-district placements
Right
for
away.
the first year or two. You have to have an established program for families to come and look
But we
at.
have savings, hopefully.
We would have savings if we have somebody that's currently on our radar to go out of district 2 years from now. So next year, it's really about building it and doing it with fidelity, so it's something that you feel good saying to families in Pembroke that we can meet your students' needs by them staying here, and then really selling yourselves to families from other districts, from the Marshfield to Situate to Cohasset to come here.
I think what I'm hearing here, right, I just want to make sure that we're clear going in. And we're not moving forward with this tonight. Let me be really clear with everybody, right? This is about the priorities, and you guys are doing exactly what we ask you to do. What we would be doing is making a $208,000 investment, and it would be an annual investment, likely for the next 3 years, where we actually establish a program. As the program gets established, you'll be able to sort of begin to certify, you know, this child was on the verge of outplacement services and being out of district, and as a result of this program, we now don't have to send them, which kind of gets to my other question and being a little innovative on funding. When a child goes out of district, it becomes more expensive for the Commonwealth because of whether it's circuit breaker or the types of things that they have to come through and mitigate, correct?
Finish your question.
So, my question is, the Commonwealth likes these things, right? Because it's less expensive. It provides services for the child in their home community, closer to home, less transportation. What if we went to our legislative team and asked, as we go into the budget, for at least startup funding for year one?
Yeah, sounds like a great
Now, I don't
idea.
know if it's possible, but it's worth it. I will also say that, you know, there has been a big push from the Commonwealth and at a Commonwealth level in these areas, right? In focusing on kids, and to your point, Katrina, right? The earlier you're able to get to these kids, the fewer services they need down the road. And candidly, happier the child is, the better the family is, the more productive. It is just a win-win-win. I don't know if that'll happen, but even if we got half or a quarter, it's part of the funding sort of answer. That's the thought.
I'm thinking too, you know, we can definitely, I can draft a letter tonight to legislators. I already wrote one today about something else. About just friendships. One of the things I think when you think about adults with disabilities, one of the biggest areas of need is friendships. So I think speaking to your point about keeping kids in districts and thinking about the trajectory of our students' lives and wanting them to stay in the community that they live in now, I think that's all the more important to be thinking about. I mean, obviously it's elementary school, but kids grow up fast. So I think as much as we can include kids in their own community, I think that leads to less isolation for that family. And so it really is an important piece that I'm appreciative of you bringing up.
So I think what we should just sort of, if it's okay with the committee, and I think it's appropriate, right, we punt this to Budget Sub.
Yep.
I think we've got some analytics to do and some conversations to have at Budget Sub. And this will be one of many things that are going to come up over the next few months
Yep.
for us to talk about, get creative with it. I think you guys have done absolutely the right thing in sort of bringing these types of things forward. But I do think we have to go in eyes wide open. This is a 3 to maybe even 4 year type of thing where you start, you establish, you build, you grow. One classroom is not going to be able to bring in out of district placement. So it's, when do you add? Is it working? Are the savings there? Are we, so we're going to have benchmarks, milestones, sort of all those things. But thank you for bringing it forward.
I had one question
Yeah, go ahead.
just for budget that could help. How long have you been seeing the trends? Obviously, this probably wasn't your first year where you thought, oh, well, we need this set things. I imagine you've been thinking about it for some time or in the back of your mind, right? So just, I think for Budget Sub, how long have you been seeing the trend, or however you want to
22
answer
years.
that?
Yeah, a long time. I mean, definitely,
It's really
it was
long.
Yeah.
pre-COVID.
Okay.
We started having conversations about district-wide programs.
Yep.
Do we house them in each of our elementary schools so students stay within their own neighborhood school? So we've thrown around kind of a couple different ideas, I'd say, for a number of years. So
I do also think it's important to say this is not a departure for our inclusive special education model. This is
Right.
in addition to an inclusive model, right? So this isn't about segregating our kids with special education needs or special needs. The kids that can be in a general education classroom will continue to do that. This is about kids with more needs and higher levels of services. So I think it's important for people
For
to
sure,
understand
and I
that.
would even say it's actually the
Right.
opposite of that, right? So we're no longer sending as
Kids
many
out of
kids
district.
out into a special education setting. You're all invited to Hub Walk if you want to come see our district-wide programs, but I would argue that our students in our district-wide programs can access general education because of the supports of those substantially separate. So
Right.
they have trained staff to go out with them into lunch, recess, specialists, ELA, math, whatever they can individually access, they have trained staff going with them. So it's,
Didn't we do this? I know,
Yeah,
I
so
know,
we
like
had a
15 years ago.
language-based program that we were tuitioning students into at
Right.
the secondary level. It was a high school program.
It was a while ago, but I remember this.
About 12 years ago.
God, I'm old. That's why I need to be done. Sorry.
Be on the website soon.
Yes.
yes,
Go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
that is it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Great job. I mean,
Thank you
really
very
good
much.
job. Very detailed. Appreciate it.
Any questions on your end? Okay, cool. Just wanted to-
So we do have an out-of-state music trip that looks pretty exciting.
Sure. In your packet, you have a field trip request for the music department in grades 4 through 8 to go to the something pavilion, Amica Pavilion, maybe. Yes, Mutual Pavilion in Providence for the Providence Brigade.
But it's a day thing. It's not
It's a
an
day
overnight.
thing. It's just an out-of-state field trip on January 24th. Obviously, you can read there about the ticket. Information is $22 per participant and per student, or for family members that want to go as well. So,
And it's super exciting seeing your kids down on the ice, kind of doing the thing. They go way back, but I remember that. So can I get a motion to approve the PCMS and elementary out-of-state music department trip to Providence as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sue, seconded by Allison. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie. Subcommittee updates.
Sure. Under subcommittee updates, as Patrick alluded to earlier in the meeting, the negotiations subcommittee, we had our first meeting last week to negotiate successor agreements for all 4 of our union contracts. We're going to create a tab on the website just to put information for folks that are interested in the process and how it's going. So I would anticipate the tab having some resources like links to our collective bargaining agreement, as well as a communication from the members of our negotiation subcommittee following a negotiations meeting. Just an opportunity for anybody that's interested in the process to kind of take a look and see where we're at. There's a huge amount of data out there that allows us to benchmark kind of what we're paying versus what other communities are paying, what contract language has been kind of a hot button issue in the state. Getting all that information out there, I think, would be helpful for people.
All public
information, right? Ed sub/policy sub is going to meet next week to take another look at some of the competency determination language, as there's some samples out there for the first time in a while, in hopes that we can get to you a draft of language so we can continue to move the high school program of studies forward. Program of studies and course selection at the high school is scheduled to really, the conversation ramps up at the beginning of February prior to school vacation week, so we want to make sure that those documents are all in the right place. It sounds like you assigned some budget subcommittee work this evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for you.
And we are
For us.
still, for long-range planning has been looking at having some playground inspections done. Some of that work has been completed, so we'll get together and take a look at our first report. And for those of you that are unaware, the vocational planning committee hasn't met in a little bit, but we will have something to meet about in about a week and a half. So the member town vote for the new building project at South Shore Tech is January 25th. So depending upon the outcome of the vote, that will drive some of our conversation and timeline towards presenting to the full committee what our options are as a district. So,
And if you know anyone in those towns, tell them to vote and make sure they have a plan and put it in their calendar.
But we can't advocate, so.
Well,
Just get out
just
and
to
vote.
vote.
Just get
I'm
out
not
and
saying
vote.
yes
No,
or
that's
no.
fine. That's
Just
all good.
vote at all.
I will also say Representative Sweezy on his Facebook page had a lot of data and detail about this. He's actually done a very good job. For those of you who don't know, he's our new state representative, was sworn in on January 1, hit the ground running. He's had a lot of things out on his Facebook page just to share data and information with his represented communities. This was a big thing that was out there to make sure folks were aware of what was happening. So.
Can you give just a brief review of what, so they're voting and what that means one way or the other? I mean, I know the answer to this.
sure.
Just,
So the member towns are voting next Saturday to move forward or not move forward with the building project. That vote requires a 51% majority across all the population. So it's not, 5 out of 9 towns have to vote yes. It's 51% of the voting population has to vote yes. Once the community and the member towns vote yes, then if you are a member, you are financially obligated to your share of what the building project will be. In most communities, that would require an additional vote for a debt exclusion override for the building project. The information that the vocational planning committee will share with you in the weeks following that vote is what it would look like as for Pembroke to be a member community, as far as what a debt exclusion would look like for us, what that looks like on the average home, some of the language changes to their regional agreement and the years in which Pembroke would be able to send students and whatnot, depending upon whether the project moves forward or not.
And how many students?
Correct.
So that's coming this spring for us.
So
The
we,
information's coming to us.
obviously, the vocational planning committee has been meeting for the past almost 2 years. Now that there are some more concrete numbers associated with the project itself, I've been working with Tom Hickey at South Shore Tech to put together what some Pembroke numbers would look like. So that information is in a place where, once we have a better idea of the outcome of next Saturday, the planning group can get together one more time and kind of work on some slides to share with you all. So it's not necessarily spring, I would say it's late winter that we'll be sharing that.
Okay, great.
Good.
So we do have a couple of meeting dates coming up.
So your next meeting is February 4th. We'll continue our budget conversations and anything else that comes up before then. You are not meeting on the 11th. You are not meeting on the 18th because that is school vacation week. So are you meeting on the 25th? Question mark?
TBD on the 4th. We'll decide that on February 4th. Okay.
We'll decide when the next meeting is.
Well, so we're meeting on February 4th, and then we'll decide if we need to meet on February 25th. I would say yes right now. I would just pencil it in for everybody. If we don't need to meet, we won't, but I would say yes right now. We also, just so everyone knows, have a joint executive session with the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night to have a discussion about
Strategy related to collective bargaining.
strategy related to collective bargaining, and making sure that the town has a cohesive strategy and the two boards are talking to each other. Always a good thing. Any other future meeting topics? So I know we've got a couple of things in the works, depending on sort of the subcommittee work, we'll have other topics to add.
I know one piece of information that was shared, I think it was during this SPED presentation, was around data for 2024, and that it usually comes at the end of January. Has that, it hasn't come yet? Okay, not yet. Got it. I just imagine that would be a future topic once you've had a chance
Yep.
to look over it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Sue? Nope, okay. So, no further topics. At 8:50, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Katrina, seconded by Sue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie, and we are adjourned.